You know, it's an amazing thing how much you actually learn about alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, when you've actually lived it. In my case, I lived with my wife for 25 years. We were together for about 27 years until she succumbed to the disease a little over 4.5 years ago. I remember in the early years, you have to realize I had no understanding of alcoholism. If you told me what that word was, I probably wouldn't have really known, other than saying, well, that's somebody who drinks a lot, and really had no understanding until where I am now. I mean, I could probably teach a class as a professor on the disease and what happens to families and structures. And it's a natural progression. And my wife's case was certainly a natural progression. I mean, when I first met her, or actually before I met her, I've always been into collecting things, and I had collected this huge collection of wine. I used to travel to New York to see my family. I'd been up in Napa Valley in Northern California a number of times. I'd been to Europe. I had collected, wines all over the world. I didn't even drink wine. A lot of times it was just the bottle or the area as a remembrance of where I was. Some of the bottles were fairly expensive. And I remember I had a wine rack when I first met my wife. I think I had probably close to 100 bottles on this wine rack, and I had it in my kitchen, and it was really for the ambiance of the kitchen. Unfortunately, that wine rack wasn't around a whole lot of time after meeting Amanda. And a large part of it is I really had no understanding of alcoholism, anything about it. So being around somebody who was probably in the earlier stages, I'm sure my wife was probably a stage 2 alcoholic when I first met her. In other words, she had created a consistency in her life where she drank on a fairly regular basis. In my wine rack, within a year and a half of meeting her, I mean, she used to come over to my house. She'd have a bottle. I said, well, okay, have one. Open one here, open one there. And then when we moved in together after about 4 months, really the entire collection was pretty much decimated. And there's about 10 bottles I absolutely told her not to touch. And I left them on the wine rack, and thinking that, just telling someone not to drink those would be enough. And I can remember the first time I felt really the pangs, it's like a pang, boing, of disappointment when I went to look at those bottles. We had been married at this point for a couple of years, and I thought they were full of wine, and I went to get one time, and they were full of water. And I remember just going, what's going on here? And in fact, it was one of the real special ones that I had gotten in New York. Actually, a friend of my family's had a winery, and it was one of their bottles. It was one you can't replace, and it was gone. And I can remember just going, what's going on here? What is going on here? And I remember feeling that kind of anger. And that was only a couple of years into our marriage. If the thing is, if you knew what you know now and you can replace it then it would make sense. But then you have no concept and you don't really understand what's going on. And this, of course, is one of the reasons why I make these videos, is so people can have awareness and understanding the red flags if you see this in a family member. If they're drinking on a consistent basis and they seem to be hiding it, or things are disappearing, alcohol is disappearing from your house and you don't really have an answer for it, or they're hiding their bottles in cans, or for some reason they don't have an off switch and you go into social settings and they don't have an off switch. They drink until you're carrying them out the front door, or they're getting inebriated way more than what's socially accepted in social environments. If you're seeing that, then it's time to step in. If they're a family member, you need to sit down and have a serious conversation, and it's time to take action. The earlier that you do, the easier that it is to handle. When you get somebody in the later stages and they're full of denial and deflection, there's not a whole lot you can do for them, and it's really heartbreaking for families. So the whole point of this video is to have prevention and to understand the red flags. And if it is early on in a relationship, it's okay to point it out. Because to be honest with you, you don't want to go down the road of someone who's not willing to change or to take care of themselves or to work on themselves if they do, in fact, have an alcohol use disorder. And again, if this type of thing resonates with you, click on the link above. Schedule a breakthrough call with me. I've helped thousands of alcoholics, and just as importantly, I've helped their families. Schedule a breakthrough call. We do a deep dive into what's going on with you and your family, and we get into the coaching program. The call is free. The coaching program is definitely not. Also, I go live every Monday through Friday right around 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, East Coast, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And then, join the Facebook group. It's called There's an Alcoholic in the Family. Wonderful group for support and, camaraderie, and, to be around other people that are struggling with this and families that are struggling with this. And again, thanks so much for listening.